Some people are born with the gift of meddling, you know? It was a Tuesday. Nothing indicated that it would be a different day. I woke up, brushed my teeth, made coffee, opened my laptop to work, and nothing. The login screen was frozen, the browser spinning in circles, Spotify muted. I thought it was a problem with the router. I restarted everything. Nothing. I went to the wiring box in the corner of the wall where the connection cables from the street are, and what did I find? A clean-cut, precise, surgical. It wasn't a technical fault. It was sabotage. I went back inside already boiling. I tried to use my cell phone data and, guess what? A message from the operator telling me that my plan had run out. Of course, because the last 2 hours of trying to connect had sucked every last ounce of digital dignity out of my 4G. I decided to go to the HOA center to see if anyone had seen anything, and it was there that I heard the nonsense coming out of her mouth. The woman who runs the association, as if she were the condominium's very own Queen Elizabeth. She welcomed me with a fake smile and a glass of iced tea in her hand. She said, with the greatest naturalness in the world, that my home's connection was under analysis, because there were reports that my excessive use of streaming was compromising the digital balance of the neighborhood. Some residents have reported that the speed has dropped in recent weeks, she said, stirring her tea with a straw as if she were talking about the weather forecast. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was basically saying that she'd cut my internet because I use it a lot, I asked, with a calm I didn't even know I had. You're saying you cut my connection because of Netflix? She laughed, a short, annoying laugh. The association is trying to maintain a fair digital standard. Your consumption was above the average recommended in the bylaws. The statute, always the statute. A document that she herself rewrites every month and no one else reads because it's a 20-page monster with tiny print and words that even a lawyer doesn't understand. I went home spitting fire. I tried to contact the operator. Hours on the phone, endless waiting, elevator music repeating until it entered my brain. When I finally managed to speak to someone, the shock came. Someone asked for the service to be disconnected using an authorization from the neighborhood administration. The woman not only cut the wire, but also called pretending to be legally responsible for my home's connection. At that moment, something inside me snapped, a kind of internal button that activates enough mode. I thought about making a fuss, but that was predictable. She would expect it. She'd expect me to explode in the neighborhood group, to write text messages, to call a meeting. That's her game, to provoke you until you look like the crazy one. Only she didn't know that I know how to play this game too. The plan started with coffee. I sat in the kitchen and mentally reviewed all the cables in the neighborhood. The whole street has that stupid shared wiring system. You know, that kind of new, modern neighborhood, full of smart technology, but in essence, everything is hung from a pole with electrical tape. Her modem was connected to the same technical rack as mine. In fact, much of the electrical wiring that ran through the back of the houses was interconnected because the condominium saved money by doing hybrid distribution, half fiber, half magic. At the same moment, I remembered the power station behind the panel in her garage. Yes, because the woman has app-controlled lighting. Everything in her house is smart. Curtains, lamps, stereo, even the cat food dispenser. And all these technological marvels depend on a little thing called connectivity. That's when the idea was born. If the internet was the link, I didn't have to retaliate by shouting. All I had to do was wait for the system to respond. The next morning, I took the stairs and went to have a look at the general wiring with a ready-made excuse. Routine check. Because in this neighborhood, all you need is a technical opinion, and no one will question you. With one simple movement, I activated what I affectionately call mirror mode. I reconnected my cable directly to the street source, protecting it with a new filter. But with one detail, the power supply for her main router depended on the same box. All I had to do was wait for the first signal peak, and it came, with gusto. At the exact moment I reactivated my internet, the system in her house flashed. Literally, the security camera turned backwards, the garden light went out, and the sound of the fountain she loved so much made a strange noise and died. The neighborhood WhatsApp group exploded. People, the lights in the president's house have all gone out. Does anyone know if the power went out? My Alexa is speaking Russian. I pretended to be surprised. I even sent a fright emoji. But inside? A party. A carnival of digital justice. The woman's house went out, as if someone had pulled the plug on her existence. I was on the balcony, drinking a lukewarm coffee that I had forgotten on the table, and yet it tasted better than any gourmet coffee. The light on the facade, which normally flickered in soft shades of blue and green, simply died. It vanished like dignity in a condominium group fight. The electric curtains, which were always closed at 6 p.m., were wide open this time. It seemed that the soul of the house had also given up, and what followed was a parade of catastrophic failures. First, the garage door jammed. Her husband, that man who looks like an extra who lives on Yes, Dear, got stuck outside. He tried to press the control, hit his pocket, shook the device as if it were a cursed maraca. Nothing. The gate wouldn't open. He looked around, not knowing whether to call for help or cry right there on the curb. Then, the fountain in the garden, the pride of the house, started spitting water upwards in random spasms. The pump, which was completely out of order, went into an outburst worthy of a hydraulic exorcism. The water gushed out as if the entire lake wanted revenge for years of remote control and app scheduling. In the neighborhood group, digital chaos mixed with analog gossip. There were neighbors asking if the whole neighborhood had lost power, others sending photos of their houses in the dark, as if it were a rare astronomical event. "Blackout at the Order's headquarters," wrote one, laughing. It became a meme within minutes. On my side, the signal came back strong. Netflix ran without choking, YouTube loaded without delay, and even the security system updates that had been stuck for days downloaded themselves. It was as if the universe had pressed the restorative justice button. But on the other side, despair was beginning to set in. The woman hadn't appeared on the sidewalk. She disappeared for a few hours, probably trying to understand what was happening to her technological sanctuary. She must have restarted the system, called the power station, emailed Alexa support in every language, but nothing was working. The signal that powered everything came from a shared point, and with my system now protected and isolated, there was no smart energy left to feed her ego. In the late afternoon, she broke the silence. She came knocking on my door as if nothing had happened. White t-shirt, red face, an expression somewhere between panic and feigned cordiality. She didn't apologize, of course. People like that never apologize. She opened her mouth in a bureaucratic tone, trying to sound like a gentle authority. "Hi! So, did you notice any oscillation in the network system today?" Oscillation? It sounded more like a digital implosion than anything. I replied with the serenity of a tired monk. "Yes, I did. When mine came back on, your house went out. Strange coincidence, isn't it?" She tried to laugh. That dull laugh that doesn't fool even a child. She said that her husband was having trouble with the gate and that the interior lights were out of sync. Synchronicity is a nickname. It looked like a medieval curse programmed by Wi-Fi itself. That's when she unleashed the most desperate attempt of the day. "Could you check that your line isn't interfering with the other connections?" Interference. Now it was my fault again. I looked at her, not hiding the irony. That's funny, because when my connection went down, nobody thought it was interference. They cut it off without asking. Remember? The silence that followed was more delicious than any HOA community buffet. She simply gave a yellow smile, muttered something like, "Let's investigate," and disappeared faster than she appeared. The next day, she tried to regain her poise. She made a post in the group saying that they were facing technical challenges in her residence, and that the condominium is not immune to the effects of technological advancement. She tried to turn the collapse of the smart home into a philosophical reflection on connectivity. Pathetic. But the neighbors didn't buy it. One even replied, "Strange, only your house fell down." And another sent a gif of a plug being pulled out, just to make sure it was debauched. Meanwhile, her system remained unstable. The lights flashed randomly. The doorbell rang on its own. The gate opened at 3 in the morning and closed in the middle of the day. Her Alexa started answering questions late. A neighbor swore he heard the device's voice saying, "I can't understand. Try later," in a tone of existential lament. She started hiring technicians, one a day. One of them spent the whole afternoon in front of the house, grimacing and scratching his head. He even talked to the electrician, who takes care of the common part of the neighborhood. No one understood why her system, which was the most modern in the lot, had simply stopped working. And she would never have the courage to admit that it was because she cut off someone's internet and pulled the wrong lucky string. Some people know how to recognize defeat. Others double down, thinking they're still in control. She, of course, belongs to the second group. Instead of accepting that she had messed up where she shouldn't have and reaped what she had sown, she decided to turn her own digital collapse into a matter of community interest. Because in her disturbed sense of authority, everything becomes an HOA issue. 2 days after the blackout at her house, a new notice appeared on the condominium's bulletin boards. Yes, the woman printed out a piece of colored sulfite paper, bright pink to be exact, and stuck it to the posts, trees, and even the door of the community laundry room. The title was in bold, "Emergency Meeting on the Community Connectivity System." The text began with a quote that, honestly, sounded like something out of a neighborhood newspaper horoscope. Where there is a failure of signal, there is an absence of unity. Below that, she described that some recent events have shown weaknesses in the neighborhood's digital ecosystem, and that we needed to talk about how to protect our community's technological integrity from individual excesses and strategic failures. Translation: she was trying to blame me again. In the WhatsApp group, she reinforced the invitation with her trademark tone. She wrote, "We will be addressing sensitive issues with respect and transparency. Your presence will be welcome, as long as you come in a constructive spirit." The message was clear. Either I show up quietly, or I become the subject of the meeting. I decided to go. Because there are times when silence doesn't work, and letting her paint the picture alone would only add more paint to her narrative. And if it was the stage she wanted, there would be an audience. I arrived at the HOA hall 5 minutes early. The atmosphere was already charged. About 20 residents were seated, some just for the chaos, others worried about the system failure. She was there, sitting at the head of the table, with a folder full of papers and a laptop open with colorful graphics displayed on the screen. That's right, she had made a presentation with graphics. She began by speaking in a gentle, paused tone, pretending to be neutral. She pointed out that there has recently been a spike in instability that has impacted the basic functionalities of technological homes, and that it is necessary to understand where certain imbalances come from so that we can return to normality. Nobody said anything. She continued, "We have records of interference coming from external connections that are not compatible with the condominium's protocols. Unfortunately, this affects the signal flow and compromises connected homes, like mine. I would like to propose a regulation of usage limits and check the compatibility of the equipment used by residents." That wasn't just a meeting. It was a courtroom in disguise. She wanted to create a digital law in the condominium, with rules on who can use what and how. Using her own failure as an excuse to control other people's internet, I raised my hand. The room looked at me. She pressed her lips together, and with as much ironic calm as I could muster, I spoke. "I'm sorry, but before creating regulations on equipment, wouldn't it be more useful to review the conduct of those who cut off other people's signals without warning?" Silence. Heavy. Some even coughed, just to disguise the tension. She tried to counter, in a thin voice. The situation called for preventive measures, but I was more direct. A preventive measure is to put a password on your own Wi-Fi. Cutting off the neighbor's connection is abuse. The discomfort was visible. One of the residents, Mr. Blake, who until then had only complained about the noise from the children, looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, but if this is going to become a rule, I want to know if we're going to have to ask permission to watch TV now." The woman tried to smile, but she was stuck. She realized that she had lost her support. Her pose as a victim of technology was falling away, and what was left was just her, isolated, trying to legislate on top of a chaos that she herself had created. The meeting ended without resolution. No rules were voted on. No new protocols were approved. All that was left was a pile of shelved suggestions and an association president in a cold sweat, realizing that she wasn't as loved as she thought. That evening, I received an anonymous message on my cell phone. "It was nice to see you put her in her place. Thank you, I don't know who sent it, but just knowing that I wasn't alone made the taste of revenge even sweeter." Over the next few days, she stopped trying to meddle, but the damage had already been done. Her system was still unstable. A curtain would go up on its own at 4 in the morning. Alexa would crash and play the same song over and over again. The porch lights flickered like a badly programmed ballad. The house seemed haunted by angry Wi-Fi. And I continued with my signal intact, surfing at speed, working in peace, watching my series without interruption, and waiting for the moment when she would finally understand that the real world is still stronger than any smart house. Her house seemed to be living through an electronic apocalypse. The lights turned on by themselves at 3 in the morning. The gate opened and closed as if it had a life of its own, and the voice commands responded with such a ridiculous delay that it seemed like revenge from Alexa herself. A neighbor said that he passed the front of the house one Sunday and heard the robotic voice shouting loud and clear, "Sorry, I didn't understand the command. Can you repeat that?" When no one was saying anything. The problem? She couldn't call any technicians from the original system company. Her contract depended on the condominium's standard infrastructure, which, according to the HOA's internal decision, ironically signed by the HOA itself months before, was to be managed on a local and community basis. The technician would only return if the network was stabilized by the original structure. And that structure was now my new system, the one I had legally protected after the sabotage was discovered. She created her own trap, trying to rewire the cables, install a new router, or pull power from somewhere else was not an option. The condominium had strict rules about external visual alterations without board approval, rules that she herself had drafted, revised, and approved with gusto. Now, every attempt to reconfigure her home stumbled over bureaucracies she had invented herself. Every email she sent asking for an exception, the new HOA leadership, renewed after the disaster, replied with a copy of the bylaws and a "thank you for your understanding." You could hear her restrained screams coming through the gardens. One afternoon she tried to call a new meeting. She sent out flyers again, now in a desperate tone, with phrases like, "Technology unites us. We need to move forward together." And, "Let's not let individualism bring down collective progress." The event took place on the sports court. It was attended by 4 people. That's including her, her husband, and 2 ladies, who seemed more interested in the cookies than the agenda. This time, I didn't go. I let the weight of my absence speak for me. And from what the neighbors said afterwards, it was the shortest meeting in the HOA's history. She tried to give a speech, show prints, repeat the collective interference story, but no one bought it. One of the ladies simply said, "I think you need an electrician, not an assembly." The phrase echoed for days in the neighborhood group. After that, she stopped trying to bring the community together. She went silent on WhatsApp. She stopped printing flyers. The HOA flag was taken down from the balcony. The lights on the facade, which used to dance to a programmed rhythm, were now switched off. The house, once a symbol of her organizational power, looked like an abandoned monument to digital arrogance. But the end really came on a Thursday morning. A removal truck appeared at her front door. No warning, no farewell, no extraordinary meeting to justify herself. In less than 3 hours, everything was packed. Furniture, boxes, even the decorative vases in the entrance hall. One of the porters commented that she was going to a place with more technological structure. Translation: she was kicked out by her own Wi-Fi. On the same day, the HOA officially updated its roster of residents, and in a rare display of bureaucratic good humor, they left a note in the neighborhood group. As of today, House 42 is free of digital interference, unnecessary drama, and ego overload. It was the most liked post in the group's history. There were laughs, heartfelt reactions, and even a gif of a rocket going up with the caption, "Goodbye." A few days later, I went to the front of the house, now empty. The garden was dry, the fountain was broken, the shutters were finally in place. No sound was coming from the walls. Everything was at peace. That peace that only comes when the interference has really gone. At the entrance to her gate, someone, and I don't know who it was, but I'd really like to thank them, had stuck a yellow post-it note, handwritten in black pen. Here the light fell. But before that, the notion fell. I came home smiling, turned on my router, opened Netflix, and put my favorite series on. No interruptions, no sabotage, no drama. Just silence, a stable connection, and the certainty that sometimes all we need to do is let the system give it back. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.